The millionaire's son was forced to take medicine by his stepmother, but one day something happened. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's begin. The suffocating heat of the deep South summer seemed to melt the asphalt of Riverton's narrow streets. Iris Sterling adjusted the portable fan towards her as she organized the shelves of the small craft shop she had inherited from her grandmother. River's Charms was a haven of colors and traditions amidst the rampant growth of modern commerce in the city's historic downtown. At 35, Iris kept the shop more for the love of the memories than for profit. Tourists adored the seed necklaces, the figurines carved from hardwood, and the natural fiber bags. But the imminent arrival of the large shopping mall just 2 blocks away threatened to change everything. "Miss Iris, I brought more of my pieces. Do you think they'll like them?" Kyle Miller, a 28-year-old artisan, entered through the door carrying a box full of small sculptures depicting local wildlife with impressive detail. "They're beautiful as always, Kyle. I'm sure they'll sell quickly," she smiled, picking up a small jaguar carved from wood. "Your talent is a gift." What Iris didn't comment on was how the sparkle in Kyle's brown eyes distracted her every time he appeared. A widow for 5 years ever since Ronan, her husband, had disappeared during a research expedition on the Blackwood River, she had closed herself off to any romantic possibility. His body was never found, but after 2 years of fruitless searching, the official declaration was issued. Iris, however, had never been able to fully overcome his absence. "Did you see the posters? The mall opens next month," Kyle commented, helping her organize the new pieces. "They're saying there's going to be a big store selling mass-produced souvenirs from abroad, prices we can't compete with." Iris sighed. It wasn't just the competition that worried her. There was the rental contract about to expire, and the landlord, Jeremy Barnes, an ambitious businessman who had bought almost the entire block, had made it clear he would triple the rent. "One day at a time, Kyle. My grandmother always said that those with art in their hands have a guaranteed future." The shop bell rang again. This time it was Dara Lim, Iris's best friend since childhood and a history professor at the State University of Riverton. "Iris, you won't believe it. I need to show you something urgent." Dara was breathless, as if she had run all the way there. Her eyes shone with an excitement Iris hadn't seen in a long time. "Calm down, breathe. What happened?" Dara looked at Kyle hesitantly. The young man understood the hint. "I'll take these pieces to the storeroom. Excuse me, ladies." As soon as he left, Dara opened her bag and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "Remember that digitization project for the Riverton Shipping Company archives we're doing in the department? I found this among documents from 1880. Look at the name." Iris took the paper carefully. It was an old deed, the paper fragile with age. Her eyes scanned the document until they stopped at a name. Mary Iris Thornbury. "My great-great-grandmother?" "Exactly. But that's not all. The deed is for a piece of land, Iris. A huge piece of land in what is practically the city's commercial center today. And from what I understand, it was never legally transferred to anyone else." Iris's heart raced. Her family had always been of humble origins, at least as far as she knew. Her grandmother had never mentioned properties or land. That doesn't make sense. If it were true, why would my family live with so many difficulties? Why would my grandmother work as a housekeeper her whole life? That's what we need to find out. The document mentions a condition for definitive possession of the land, something related to a hidden treasure or a family secret. The language is confusing, full of legal terms from that era. I need more time to study it, but what if it's true, Iris? What if your family owns part of downtown Riverton? The storeroom door opened and Kyle returned. Quickly, Dara put the document away. "I need to get back to the university. We'll talk later." She hugged her friend and whispered, "Don't tell anyone yet." Dara left in a hurry, leaving Iris lost in thought. The rest of the day passed in a blur as she distractedly attended to customers, her mind buzzing with possibilities. In the late afternoon, as she was about to close the shop, the bell rang again. A tall, elegantly dressed man with dark sunglasses entered. Something about his posture sent a chill down Iris's spine. Good afternoon, I'm looking for the owner. That's me, how can I help you? The man removed his glasses, revealing shrewd and calculating eyes. My name is Julian Barnes. I believe you know my Uncle Jeremy, your landlord. Iris nodded, tense. The Barnes family was powerful in Riverton, owners of ventures throughout the city. I've come to make you an offer that might interest you. My uncle mentioned the rent adjustment and I imagine you're concerned. I'm listening, she replied cautiously. Our company is buying all the establishments on this street for the mall's expansion. We're offering a fair price for the commercial space and, of course, the possibility of a spot in the new centre with subsidised rent for a year. Iris felt her blood run cold. It wasn't just a rent increase. They wanted her space, her history, her memories. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in selling. Julian smiled condescendingly. I understand your emotional attachment, but I'm afraid it's inevitable. If you don't sell to us, eventually the rent will make the business unviable. It's just a matter of time. My answer is still no. The man placed a card on the counter. Think it over carefully. You have until the end of the month. After that, the offer drops by half. After he left, Iris locked the door and collapsed into a chair. Tears threatened to fall, but she held them back. It wasn't her nature to show weakness. She picked up her phone and called Dara. We need to talk more about that document. Can it be today? Across town, in a luxurious office on the top floor of a commercial building, Jeremy Barnes received his nephew. So? Did she accept? Not yet, Uncle. But she will. Everyone eventually does. Jeremy frowned. We don't have that much time. Construction needs to start in 60 days if we want to open before Christmas. Why so much interest in that specific little shop? It's not even the biggest on the block. The old businessman slowly stood up and walked to the window, from where he could see the Blackwood River winding in the distance. That land has a particular history, Julian. A history that has involved my family for more generations than you can imagine. Meanwhile, in a small apartment on the outskirts of Riverton, Kyle Miller carefully observed old photographs spread across his table. In one of them, a man very similar to him smiled beside a native woman. On the back, an inscription, My grandfather Charles and the true heiress, 1970. The next morning, Iris woke to the insistent ring of her cell phone. It was Dara, her voice overflowing with excitement. I didn't sleep all night researching. You won't believe what I found. What? Tell me. Not over the phone. Meet me at the Acorn Cafe in half an hour. And Iris, come alone. The Acorn Cafe was in a small square in the historic downtown, a few yards from Iris's shop. When she arrived, Dara was already sitting at a back table, a thick folder beside her and 2 cups of coffee in front. I started investigating more about your great-great-grandmother and discovered something extraordinary, Dara said as soon as Iris sat down. Mary Iris wasn't just a landowner. She was the daughter of a wealthy Portuguese merchant and a native leader. When her father died, he left her all his properties, something unusual for the time. But that doesn't explain why my family never knew about these lands. Dara opened the folder and showed copies of old newspapers. Because there was a conflict. Your great-great-grandfather's partners didn't accept that a mixed-race woman would inherit everything. There was a lawsuit, and although Mary Iris legally won, she faced threats. That's when she created an ingenious system. Dara showed another document. She registered the property with a special clause. The land could only be claimed by a direct descendant who solved a riddle and found the jewel of the forest. Meanwhile, the land would remain under fiduciary administration. Jewel of the forest? What riddle is that? I don't know yet, but I found references to an extremely rare river jade medallion. And guess what? The fiduciary administration was in the hands of the Barnes family. Iris felt dizzy. The same Barnes. Who are my landlords? Who want to buy my shop? Exactly. They've been managing this land for generations, probably profiting from it. If a legitimate heir appears with proof. They'd lose everything, Iris completed, beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. But this is crazy, Dara. We're talking about something that happened over 100 years ago. How do I prove I'm a direct descendant? And what medallion is this? Remember that old photo of your grandmother wearing a green necklace? I always thought it was costume jewelry. The memory came instantly. the necklace her grandmother wore on special occasions, and that had disappeared after her passing. Iris always thought some distant relative had taken it as a keepsake. "I need to go to my grandmother's apartment. I haven't been able to clear everything out since she—" Iris's voice trailed off. "Let's go together," Dara offered, squeezing her friend's hand. As they left the cafe, they didn't notice the man in the cap watching them from the corner, nor did they notice when he made a quick call. "Mr. Barnes, I think we have a problem. The woman from the shop, she's finding out." Iris's grandmother's apartment was in an old building in the dockside quarter. Small but cozy, it remained exactly as it was on the day the old lady had left 2 years prior. Iris rarely went there, as the memories were too painful. "Where do we start?" Dara asked, looking at the antique furniture and walls covered with family photographs. Her bedroom, Grandma had a special box where she kept important things. In the simple bedroom, with a single bed and a dark wooden wardrobe, Iris went straight to a small chest of drawers. At the back of the last drawer, she found a carved wooden box with native motifs. This is the box. She never let anyone touch it. Carefully, Iris opened the object. Inside were yellowed letters, some old photographs, birth certificates, and a small golden key. "Do you know this key?" Dara asked. Iris shook her head. "I've never seen it before." As they examined the contents of the box, Iris found a particularly intriguing photo. Her grandmother, young, beside an elegant man in front of a large house. "This man looks like a Barnes," Dara commented, observing the photograph. "The posture, the manners, it must be Jeremy's father or grandfather. But why? Would my grandmother be with him?" Continuing their search, they found a red wax-sealed envelope at the bottom of the box. In the center of the seal, there was a symbol that Iris recognized immediately, the same design carved on her shop door, which her grandmother had insisted on keeping when they opened the business. "It's the same symbol," she whispered, carefully breaking the seal. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter in elegant, old calligraphy. "To my descendant. If you are reading this, it means the time has come to reclaim what is rightfully ours. The jade medallion is the key to our legacy. It opens the way to the original document that proves our ownership of the lands in the heart of Riverton. The medallion is hidden where the river meets memory, where past and future unite in harmony. Only a pure heart, one that values our origins and traditions, will be able to find it. Remember, the Barnes are guardians, not owners. The trust was betrayed long ago. Be cautious. There are those who would do anything to keep this secret buried. With love and hope, Mary Iris Thornbury." A heavy silence fell between the two friends as they processed the message's content. "This is unbelievable," Dara finally spoke. "Your great-great-grandmother left clues for a descendant to reclaim the property. But what does 'where the river meets memory' mean? Is it some kind of riddle?" Before they could discuss further, they heard a noise coming from the living room. They were not alone in the apartment. "Someone's here," Iris whispered, quickly putting the letter in her pocket. The two women exchanged tense glances, looking for something that could serve as a weapon. Dara grabbed a heavy lamp, while Iris held a metal picture frame. Slowly, they approached the door. When they opened it, they found Kyle Miller standing in the living room, looking at the photographs on the wall. "Kyle, what are you doing here? How did you get in?" Iris asked, surprised and relieved at the same time. The young artisan turned, looking equally surprised. "The door was open. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you." "The door wasn't open," Dara retorted, still holding the lamp. "We locked it." Kyle looked uncomfortable. I came looking for you, Iris. I went to the shop and a neighbor said she saw you coming here with Dara. I was worried after that man's visit yesterday." "And why would you be so worried?" Dara questioned, suspicious. "Because," he hesitated, "because there's something I need to tell you. Something about the Barnes family and about Riverton's past." Iris and Dara exchanged confused glances. "My grandfather worked for the Barnes for decades," Kyle continued. "He was the family's accountant and discovered irregularities, old documents being manipulated. When he questioned his boss, he was threatened. He spent the rest of his life gathering evidence against them." What kind of evidence? Iris asked. Documents that show how they illegally appropriated lands in downtown Riverton, lands that originally belonged to a native family. Your family, Iris. The shock was visible on both women's faces. How do you know it's her family? Dara asked. By the symbol. Kyle pointed to a small tattoo on his wrist, usually covered by his leather bracelets. It was the same symbol as the letters seal, the same one carved on Iris's shop door. My grandfather made me promise I would find the true heirs and help them reclaim what belongs to them. And that's why you approached me, my shop? Was it all planned? Iris's voice trembled between hurt and confusion. At first, yes, Kyle admitted. But then I met you. Your passion for traditions, your love for local crafts. I realized it wasn't just about justice or land, but about preserving a history, a culture, our culture. The silence that followed was interrupted by Dara's cell phone ringing. It's the university, she said, quickly answering. Hello? Yes. What? Her expression changed to panic. I'm coming now. What happened? Iris asked when she hung up. There was an accident in the archive. A small fire exactly in the section where the documents I found were, and worse, someone broke into my office. My computer is destroyed. The three exchanged glances, the gravity of the situation finally becoming clear. They know, Kyle said somberly. The Barnes know we're investigating. We need to find the medallion before them, Iris stated, determination replacing fear in her voice. Where the river meets memory, where past and future unite. The Portside Museum, Dara exclaimed suddenly. It's at the confluence of the Blackwood River and the Silver Stream River, and it was built on the site of the old port where your great-great-grandmother probably arrived in Riverton. It makes sense, Kyle agreed. The museum holds the city's memory of river trade. And the golden key, Iris completed, pulling the small object from the box. It must open something there. They decided to go to the museum immediately, but with caution. If the Barnes already knew about their investigations, they were probably being watched. Let's split up, Kyle suggested. I'll go ahead to check if it's safe. You two wait 20 minutes and then head to the museum. We'll meet at the permanent rubber exhibition. As Kyle left, Dara grabbed Iris's arm. Are you sure we can trust him? He just showed up with this story. Iris looked at the door through which the young artisan had just left. Her heart told her to trust, but her mind advised caution. We don't have much choice now, but we'll stay alert. They put away the key and the letter and left the apartment determined to unravel the mystery that linked their lives to Riverton's past and the future yet to be written. On the way to the museum, neither of them noticed the black car following them at a safe distance, nor did they notice when the man at the wheel spoke on the phone. Mr. Barnes, they're heading to the museum. Yes, the young man is involved too. Understood, sir. I'll be discreet. The sun began to set over the Blackwood River, painting Riverton's sky with shades of orange and red, as a centuries-old dispute over power and land prepared to reach its climax. The Portside Museum was an imposing building on the banks of the Blackwood River, an old warehouse from the golden age of rubber transformed into a cultural space. In the late afternoon, with fewer visitors, the place took on an almost mystical atmosphere, with soft lights highlighting historical objects and the muffled sound of the river's waters coming through the windows. Dara and Iris entered the museum 20 minutes after Kyle, as agreed. They paid for their tickets and headed directly to the exhibition on the rubber cycle, where they were supposed to meet him. I don't see him, Iris whispered, looking around. The room was practically empty, except for a couple of tourists and a bored-looking guard near the exit. Let's wait a bit, Dara suggested, feigning interest in a display case showing instruments used in latex extraction. 10 minutes passed, and Kyle didn't appear. Worry began to set in between them when Iris felt her phone vibrate. It was a message from an unknown number. Change of plans, found something in the indigenous watercraft room. Come discreetly. K. The two exchanged glances and headed to the mentioned section, located on the upper floor of the museum. The indigenous watercraft room was larger and darker than the others, dominated by a traditional dugout canoe suspended from the ceiling and dramatically lit. On the walls, Old photos showed indigenous people navigating the local rivers. "Kyle," Iris called softly, looking around the seemingly empty room. There was no answer, only the hum of the air. Conditioning broke the silence. "Something's not right," Dara murmured, her body tense. "I think we'd better go Before she could finish the sentence, they heard the unmistakable sound of a door closing. They quickly turned to see the room's entrance blocked by a tall man, the same one Iris recognized as Julian Barnes. "Ladies, what a pleasant coincidence," he said with a calculated smile. "Admiring our rich southern history?" "What do you want, Barnes?" Iris asked directly, her body instinctively positioning itself protectively in front of Dara. "Just to talk. It seems we have common interests." He took a step forward, making them retreat. "My uncle would be very interested to know why you are researching old Thornbury family property records." "I don't know what you're talking about," Iris replied, trying to buy time while her eyes scanned the room for another exit. Julian laughed, a humorless sound. "Let's stop playing games, Miss Sterling. We know about the document your friend found. We know about Mary Iris's letter. And more importantly, we know about the medallion." The shock on the women's faces confirmed what he suspected. "Where's Kyle?" Dara asked, her voice firm despite the fear. "Mr. Miller? Interesting. That you ask about him." Julian slowly walked the perimeter of the room like a predator circling its prey. "I'm afraid the young artisan isn't exactly who you think he is." "What did you do to him?" Iris's voice came out almost as a scream. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. In fact, he should be comfortably settled in my uncle's office right now, receiving his reward." "Reward?" Dara repeated, confused. "For finding the heiresses, of course. It was years of work, you know. Discovering which branch of the Thornbury family had survived, who might have a right to the inheritance. Kyle was very efficient." The betrayal hit Iris like a physical blow. All that time, the conversations, the apparent interest, all a charade. Her heart refused to believe, even when her mind told her it made sense. "I don't believe you," she said, more to herself than to Julian. "You don't have to believe. You just have to be sensible." He pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I have a generous offer here. $1 million for the formal relinquishment of any claim to the Thornbury lands. That's more money than you'd make in 10 years with that little shop." "Why offer? Money if, as you say, we have no right to anything?" Dara questioned, stepping forward. The question caught Julian by surprise. He hesitated for a moment, quickly regaining his composure. "Just to avoid unnecessary complications. Lawsuits are draining." "Or perhaps," Iris completed, gaining courage, "you're scared because you know we do have a right, that the medallion proves it." The mention of the medallion made Julian's eyes gleam. "So you've already found it?" Interesting. Iris realized her mistake too late. Revealing too much to the enemy was dangerous. "We don't have the medallion," Dara quickly interjected. "We just know of its existence." "Well, in that case, perhaps I can help you," he replied with false cordiality. "I know this museum like the back of my hand. My family is one of the main donors, you know. I can show you certain items that aren't on public display." As he spoke, Julian moved towards a side door, almost camouflaged in the dark wall of the room. "This way, ladies. I promise it will be enlightening." Iris and Dara exchanged apprehensive glances. Following Julian seemed dangerous, but staying there, trapped, offered no better alternative. Besides, if he really knew where the medallion was, "Let's go," Iris decided, firmly holding Dara's hand. "But no tricks, Barnes." Julian smiled again, that smile that didn't reach his eyes, and opened the door, revealing a narrow staircase that led down to what appeared to be a basement. The private collections are below, few have access. Reluctantly, the two women followed him down the dimly lit stairs. The air became progressively damper and colder as they descended. Iris felt her heart pounding in her chest, torn between fear and the determination to find answers. They reached a long corridor with several metal doors. Julian confidently walked to the last one, inserting a key into the lock. "After you," he indicated, opening the heavy door. The room was surprisingly spacious and well lit, contrasting with the dark corridor. It looked like a museum storage area with metal shelves filled with catalogued objects, old maps hanging on the walls, and work tables with conservation instruments. "Welcome to Riverton's true treasure," Julian announced, closing the door behind him. "Artifacts that tell the unofficial history of the city." "What is this place?" Dara asked, her historian's eyes shining despite the circumstances. "The Barnes Archive. My family has been collecting memories for generations." As Julian spoke, Iris observed the surroundings, looking for something that could help them. It was then that she noticed in a display case in the center of the room a small green object that glowed intensely under the artificial light. It was a jade medallion carved in the shape of a local leaf with delicate native inscriptions on its surface. "Found what you're looking for, Mrs. Sterling?" Julian's voice had a triumphant tone. "Yes, it's your great-great-grandmother's medallion. Beautiful, isn't it? It's been with us for over 100 years. You stole it," Iris accused, her voice trembling with indignation. "Stole? No. My great-grandfather received it as collateral, an agreement between families." "What agreement?" Dara asked, cautiously approaching the display case. Mary Iris was a woman ahead of her time, but still naive. She believed she could protect her lands with riddles and hiding places. She didn't realize that true power lies in the hands of those who control the documents, the records. As he spoke, Julian opened a drawer and pulled out a bundle of yellowed papers. "Here's the whole story. The original land grant, the temporary transfer to Barnes administration, and the document your great-great-grandmother never signed, which would have made the transfer permanent. She refused to sign," Iris concluded, the pieces of the puzzle finally fitting together, "and that's why she created the medallion system, so that a descendant could prove ownership when it was safe." "Exactly. But she made a fatal mistake. She entrusted the medallion to the wrong person." Julian smiled. "Her own daughter, seduced by my great-grandfather, handed over the key to the family fortune for love." He almost spat out the last word. The revelation hit Iris like a slap, a family betrayal as old as the land dispute itself. "And now what do you intend to do?" Dara asked, her mind frantically searching for a way out. "Why, conclude the deal, obviously. You sign a formal relinquishment of any claim, receive generous compensation, and everyone goes on with their lives." Julian extended an expensive pen towards Iris. "Simple as that." "And if we refuse?" Julian's smile disappeared. "That would be regrettable. This basement is quite isolated, you know, and there are rumors of tunnels that connect the museum directly to the river." The veiled threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Iris looked at Dara, then at the medallion, in the display case, and finally at the documents in Julian's hands. "Let me see the papers first," she asked, buying time while her mind worked on a plan. Julian seemed satisfied with the apparent capitulation. He placed the documents on a nearby table and made an inviting gesture. "Be my guest, you'll see everything is in order." While Iris examined the papers, Dara moved discreetly towards the display case. If they could get the medallion... The basement door suddenly opened, making the three turn in surprise. In the doorway stood Kyle, breathless, with a small cut on his forehead, and eyes reflecting determination. "Step away from them, Julian," he ordered, his voice firmer than Iris had ever heard. "Miller!" Julian seemed not surprised, just annoyed. "How did you escape my men?" "Don't underestimate a river dweller who grew up on the banks of the Silver Stream," Kyle replied, entering the room and closing the door behind him. "Now, I think you'd better explain to these ladies that your story about me was a lie." "True?" Iris asked, her heart torn between hope and caution. Kyle looked directly at her. "Yes. Everything I told you in the apartment was true. My grandfather worked for the Barnes and discovered the fraud. The only part I omitted was that Julian approached me 2 months ago, offering money to find you and convince you to sell the shop without questioning." "And you accepted," Dara concluded, accusatory. "I pretended to accept. I needed to know what they were up to." Kyle took another step forward. "When I found out it was about the Thornbury inheritance, I understood why my grandfather made me swear to find the true heirs." Julian let out a dry laugh. "Very touching. and completely useless. He pulled a small gun from the inner pocket of his jacket. "Now all of you will sit down and sign the documents I've prepared," or he couldn't finish the sentence. A deafening alarm began to blare through the museum, red lights flashing in the corridors. "What is that?" Julian shouted, momentarily distracted. Kyle smiled. "Let's just say I triggered a few fire alarms on the way. And maybe I mentioned to security that I saw suspicious people entering restricted areas." Taking advantage of the confusion, Dara ran to the display case, breaking the glass with a paperweight she grabbed from the table. The sound of shattering glass mingled with the alarm. "Stop!" Julian shouted, pointing the gun at her. Iris reacted instinctively, pushing a bookshelf towards him. Documents, artifacts, and books fell, creating a momentary barrier. Kyle took the opportunity to advance, trying to disarm Julian. The two men struggled, while Dara managed to grab the medallion and Iris collected the historical documents from the table. "Got it!" Dara shouted, showing the jade medallion. Iris nodded, putting the papers in her bag. "Let's get out of here." Kyle and Julian continued their physical struggle, knocking over more shelves and tables. In a moment of carelessness, Julian managed to push Kyle against the wall and point the gun again. "The game's over," he growled. "I don't think it's a good idea to shoot with the museum full of security guards," Kyle retorted, remaining calm despite the situation. As if to confirm his words, they heard voices and hurried footsteps in the corridor. Someone banged hard on the door. "Museum security. Is anyone in there?" Julian looked frantically around, his plan crumbling before his eyes. In a desperate move, he grabbed a folder of documents from a nearby shelf and ran to a side door previously unnoticed by the women. "This isn't over," he threatened before disappearing through what appeared to be a service tunnel. As soon as Julian left, Kyle ran to the women. "Are you all right?" Iris nodded, still processing everything that had happened. You're really on our side?" Before Kyle could answer, the main basement door was violently opened, revealing two museum security guards with flashlights. "Freeze! What are you doing here?" Dara, always quick-witted, stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Dara Lim, a history professor at the State University of Riverton. We were investigating historical artifacts when we were attacked by a man. He fled through that door." She pointed to where Julian had disappeared. The security guards seemed skeptical, but Dara's university badge and the state of destruction in the room lent credibility to the story. "We'll need formal statements," one of them informed, while the other checked the emergency exit. "Of course, we'll do that," Kyle agreed. "But first we need to ensure the safety of these historical artifacts. They are extremely valuable to Riverton's heritage." As the security guards called for backup on their radios, the three exchanged meaningful glances. The medallion was safe in Dara's hand, hidden by her sleeve, and the important documents in Iris's bag. The next hour was a blur of statements, forms, and partial explanations. They omitted the part about the land dispute and the medallion, focusing on the attack by a man who claimed to be from the Barnes family. The name by itself made the security guards exchange worried glances. No one wanted trouble with one of the city's most powerful families. Finally, after promising to return the next day for more detailed statements, they were released from the museum, which had already been evacuated due to the fire alarm. Outside, night had completely fallen. Over Riverton, the city lights reflected on the dark waters of the Blackwood River, creating a mesmerizing spectacle. "We need to go somewhere safe," Kyle suggested, looking nervously around. "The Barnes have eyes all over the city." "My apartment is out of the question," Iris commented. "They already know where I live." "Mine too," Dara agreed. "And the university is probably being watched after the accident in the archive." Kyle thought for a moment. "I know a place. My aunt has a small guest house in Willow Creek across the river. It's simple but safe and discreet." "Can we trust her?" Dara asked, still cautious. "With our lives," Kyle assured. "She never liked the Barnes. Her husband worked on the docks and was wronged by them in the 80s. They decided to follow the plan. Avoiding taxis, which could be easily tracked, they took a bus to the port, where they boarded a small speedboat that regularly transported people to the river communities. During the crossing of the Blackwood River, under the starry southern sky, they finally had a moment to examine their treasures. It's incredible, Dara murmured, studying the jade medallion under the boat's dim light. The carving technique is typically indigenous but with Portuguese influences, a true cultural fusion. The medallion, the size of a large coin, had delicate carvings representing leaves and indigenous symbols. In the center, the same symbol Iris had recognized on the letter's seal and Kyle's tattoo. And the most incredible thing, Kyle observed, is how perfectly it fits with this. He pulled a small metallic object from his pocket that looked like an antique locket. It belonged to my grandfather. He said it was part of the truth. Kyle opened the locket, revealing a hollow space the exact size of the jade medallion. When Dara placed the medallion inside, they heard a satisfying click. It's a key, Iris understood. The two parts form a key. But a key to what? Dara asked. To this, perhaps. Iris took the small golden key they had found in her grandmother's box from her bag. 3 parts of the same secret. Kyle examined the objects thoughtfully. My grandfather always said the truth was kept where the waters meet, but do not mix. The meeting of the waters, Dara exclaimed, referring to the famous natural phenomenon where the Blackwood River and the Silver Stream River run side by side without mixing for several miles. It's an emblematic landmark of Riverton. And it was also the location of the old Thornbury farm, Kyle added, according to the documents my grandfather kept. Iris felt a shiver run down her spine. Everything was starting to make sense, the pieces of the centuries-old puzzle finally fitting together. Tomorrow, she decided, her voice firm with new determination. Tomorrow we go to the meeting of the waters and find out once and for all what my great-great-grandmother hid. The speedboat approached the bank of Willow Creek, where the cozy lights of the small river village glowed like fireflies. For that night they would be safe. But everyone knew the real battle was just beginning. On the opposite side of the river, in his luxurious office, Jeremy Barnes listened to his nephew's furious account of the events at the museum. Incompetence, the old businessman roared, slamming his fist on the mahogany desk. How did you let them take the medallion? It was a trap, Uncle. That cursed Miller triggered the alarms, created a distraction. Jeremy took a deep breath, trying to control his anger. And the documents, at least you saved the most important documents? Julian opened the folder he had managed to take with him during his escape. Only part of them. Miss Sterling took the originals of the land grant. The old Barnes closed his eyes, processing the magnitude of the disaster. You know what this means, don't you? If they manage to put all the pieces together, if they find the safe at the meeting of the waters, we'll lose everything, Julian completed darkly. The mall, the downtown properties, everything. No, Jeremy replied, a sinister determination in his eyes. I won't allow it, not after 5 generations of keeping this secret. He picked up the phone. Gather your most reliable men, we know where they'll go, and this time there will be no mistakes. Night advanced over Riverton, enveloping the city in its dark mantle. On one side of the river, 3 unlikely allies planned to recover a stolen inheritance. On the other, a powerful family prepared to defend its empire, built on centuries-old lies. And in the middle, flowing undisturbed as a silent witness to history, the Blackwood River continued its eternal course, guarding secrets yet to be revealed on its banks. The guest house of Kyle's aunt was a simple but welcoming construction by the river. Colorful hammocks swayed on the front porch, and the smell of fresh fish and local stew filled the air. Aunt Zelda, a 70-year-old woman with grey hair and sharp eyes that seemed to read people's souls, received them with a mix of curiosity and concern. Kyle, showing up like this in the middle of the night. Something serious happened, didn't it? She asked, serving them strong coffee as they settled into the back kitchen, away from the few guests sleeping in the front rooms. It's complicated, Aunt, Kyle replied, briefly introducing Iris and Dara. We need a safe place to spend the night and organize some important documents. Aunt Zelda's eyes gleamed with understanding. It has to do with those papers of your grandfather's, doesn't it? The ones he kept in that metal box under the floorboards? Kyle nodded, surprised. You knew? My brother had no secrets from me. I know he spent years collecting evidence against the Barnes. She looked at Iris intently. And you must be June's granddaughter. The same eyes, the same stubborn chin. "You knew my grandmother?" Iris asked, surprised. "Riverton may have grown, but it's still a town where everyone knows everyone, especially the old-timers." Zelda smiled nostalgically. "June worked for the Barnes when she was young, just like my brother. That's where they met, I think." This information caught Iris by surprise. "My grandmother never mentioned that." "Some memories are too painful to share," the old woman commented enigmatically. "Now eat and rest. The back room is ready with 3 good hammocks. We'll talk more in the morning." Despite the day's fatigue and tension, the trio spent hours examining the documents and objects they had recovered. On the small kitchen table, under the yellowish light of a simple lamp, they spread out, their collection of historical treasures. "These documents confirm everything," Dara murmured, studying the old papers with the trained eye of a historian. The original land grant to the Portuguese Anthony Thornbury in 1830, his marriage to the native Ara, the birth of Mary Iris Thornbury in 1845, and the temporary transfer to Barnes administration in 1881. "Temporary for almost 150 years, Kyle commented ironically. "What I still don't understand," Iris said, turning the jade medallion between her fingers, "is why my great-great-grandmother didn't fight more openly for her lands. Why create this whole system of riddles and hiding places? Because she was protecting something more valuable than land," a voice replied from the kitchen doorway. Aunt Zelda stood there, an old photo album in her hands. She was protecting her family. The old woman sat with them at the table, carefully opening the album. "This belonged to my brother. He collected not only documents but stories, oral accounts, photographs." On the yellowed pages, they saw old photos of Riverton, newspaper clippings, and meticulous notes. Zelda turned a few pages until she came to a particularly intriguing photo. A group of people in front of a colonial mansion, among them an elegantly dressed native woman in European style, but with traditional adornments, including what appeared to be the jade medallion. "Mary Iris Thornbury," Zelda pointed out, and next to her, Edmund Barnes, the patriarch of the time, the man who promised to protect her lands while she resolved legal issues in Portugal. "But she never returned from Portugal," Dara guessed. "She did, yes, 6 months later, but she found a different Riverton. Edmund had spread rumors that she had sold the lands, that she had abandoned the city, and when she tried to contest..." Zelda paused dramatically. "What happened?" Iris asked, fearing the answer. "They tried to silence her. An accident on the river that almost took her life. That's when she realized that openly confronting the Barnes was too dangerous. She decided to retreat, to pretend she had given up, while secretly devising a plan for the future." Zelda turned a few more pages, revealing an old newspaper advertisement. "Hydraulic engineer wanted for confidential project. Date, 1882. Mary Iris hired a Swiss engineer to build something at the meeting of the waters," Zelda explained. "A safe hidden in such a way that it could only be accessed under specific conditions. Inside it, she placed the only document the Barnes truly feared, proof that Edmund had forged signatures and threatened witnesses to seize the lands." "And the safe was never found," Kyle concluded. "The Barnes spent generations searching. They knew of its existence but not its exact location. The medallion, the locket, and the key are the 3 pieces that together reveal the way." Iris looked at the 3 objects on the table, feeling the weight of the family history they carried. "And tomorrow we will finally unravel this mystery." "It won't be easy," Zelda warned. "The Barnes know the legend, as well as we do. And now that you have the medallion, they will be desperate." "We are prepared," Kyle affirmed, more confident than he truly felt. Zelda stood up, heading to an old cabinet in the corner of the kitchen. From inside, she retrieved a carved wooden box, similar to the one Iris had found in her grandmother's apartment. "My brother wanted this to reach you when the time was right. I think that time is now." Inside the box was a hand-drawn map showing the region of the meeting of the waters in detail. A small red X marked a specific point on the bank, with notes in old calligraphy. The exact spot where the strongbox was built, Zelda explained. But there's a crucial detail. It's only accessible during the river's low water season, when the water level drops enough to reveal the entrance, and that only happens a few weeks a year. And we're in that season now? Dara asked, her researcher's mind already calculating possibilities. It started 3 days ago. We have approximately 2 weeks before the waters rise again. The four exchanged determined glances. The plan for the next day was formed. They would go to the meeting of the waters, using the map and the 3 artifacts to locate and open Mary Iris's secret safe. Before retiring to rest, Iris asked for a moment alone with Kyle on the back porch. The southern night enveloped them with sounds of the forest and the gentle murmur of the river. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked directly. "About your grandfather, about what you knew of my family." Kyle leaned on the porch railing, looking at the dark waters. "At first, I wasn't sure if you were really the heiress. There were rumors of other branches of the Thornbury family. And then," he hesitated, turning to face her, "then I started to care about you, not just as the heiress I needed to find, but as Iris, the woman who keeps traditions alive, who values our roots." There was a moment of silence between them, laden with unexpressed feelings. "When Julian approached me," Kyle continued, "I realized it was getting dangerous. I wanted to protect you, keeping you away from all this. But then Dara found the document, and events began to accelerate. I believe you," Iris finally said. "I don't know why, but I feel I can trust you. Maybe it's the native blood recognizing an ally." A small smile appeared on Kyle's lips. "Or maybe it's just the heart recognizing what the mind still tries to deny." Before Iris could answer, Dara appeared at the door. "Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." She held the medallion under a small pocket magnifying glass. "I noticed something strange in the carvings. They're not just decorative. It's a coded script." Back at the kitchen table, the 3 leaned over the medallion as Dara explained her discovery. "It's a hybrid writing system, combining native symbols with disguised Latin letters. My specialty at the university is precisely the evolution of writing among indigenous peoples who had contact with Europeans." "And what does it say?" Kyle asked eagerly. "I'm still deciphering it, but it seems to be a precise instruction. On the 3rd moon of the low water, when the sun rises directly over the confluence, the door reveals itself. Use the 3 keys in the order of blood." "The order of blood," Iris repeated thoughtfully. "It must refer to the family lineage." "We need to be there exactly at dawn," Kyle concluded. Dara nodded. "And tomorrow is the 3rd day of the new moon, the 3rd moon of the low water season. Fate seemed to conspire in their favor. Or perhaps, as Aunt Zelda suggested before retiring for the night, Mary Iris still looks after her own, even after so many years." With that comforting thought, the trio finally went to bed, each in their hammock in the small back room. Sleep came quickly, filled with intense dreams of rivers, forests, and long-lost ancestors. Iris dreamed of a woman with native features and a proud bearing, wearing the jade medallion. In the dream, the woman smiled at her and said in a language Iris somehow understood, "Truth sets you free, my daughter, but only when you are ready to hear it." They woke before dawn, the sky still dotted with stars. Aunt Zelda was already up, preparing a hearty breakfast and separating supplies for the journey. "My nephew Jareth will take you in his boat," she informed them as they ate quickly. "He's the most reliable fisherman on the river, knows every corner of the meeting of the waters." Jareth was a middle-aged man, his skin tanned by the sun and his hands calloused from daily work with nets and hooks. His boat, a modest but well-maintained vessel, awaited them at the small pier behind the guest house. "I don't like the barns," was all he said when Kyle briefly explained the mission, enough to ensure his loyalty. They departed as the sky began to lighten on the horizon, navigating silently through the still dark waters of the Blackwood River. The boat cut through the waves smoothly, guided by Jareth's skill, who knew every current and every backwater. "Are we being followed?" Dara asked at one point, looking nervously behind them. Jareth scanned the horizon with eyes trained by decades of navigation. "I don't see anyone, but that doesn't mean anything. On the river, things are not always what they seem. The journey continued for approximately an hour, the boat now navigating a stretch where the division between the dark waters of the Blackwood River and the muddy waters of the Silver Stream River could be clearly seen, the famous meeting of the waters. "It's there," Jareth pointed to a small beach emerging on the bank, visible only due to the low water. "That rock formation looks like the one described on the map." As they approached, the sun began to rise on the horizon, casting golden rays over the two-toned waters. It was a breathtaking spectacle, nature displaying one of its most impressive works of art. Jareth docked the boat on the small strip of sand and gravel. "I'll stay here watching. Shout if you need help." The three disembarked, carrying a small backpack with the artifacts, water, and some basic tools that Aunt Zelda had insisted they take. Following the map, they walked along the bank for about 200 yards until they reached a rock formation that partially jutted out over the water. According to the notes, in normal times that spot would be completely submerged. "It must be here," Kyle confirmed, comparing the natural formations with the map drawings. They carefully examined the rocks, looking for any sign of human intervention. It was Iris who noticed first, a small, almost imperceptible carving in the stone, but which exactly reproduced the medallion's symbol. "Here," she called, pointing to the mark. When the three gathered around the discovery, something magical happened. The sun, now completely above the horizon, cast its rays precisely over the spot where they stood. The light, reflecting on the meeting waters, created a special glow that illuminated a previously invisible crack in the rock. "Incredible," Dara murmured. Mary Iris calculated even the exact position of the sun. The crack revealed a small opening, approximately the size of a book, with 3 distinct slots arranged in a triangular pattern. "The 3 keys in the order of blood," Kyle quoted, pulling the locket from his pocket. Iris held the jade medallion and Dara the small golden key. "The question is, what's the correct order?" Dara asked. "Mary Iris was the first of the lineage to legally own the lands," Iris reasoned. "Then came my great-grandmother, who, according to Aunt Zelda, was the one who betrayed the family. And then my grandmother, who kept the golden key. So the order would be medallion, locket, and golden key," Kyle suggested. "No," Iris corrected after a moment's thought. "The order of blood must be older. The native people were on these lands long before the legal document. The jade represents the original people, the indigenous. The locket, the union with the Portuguese, and the golden key, the future generations, the continuity of the lineage." With this logic, Iris first inserted the jade medallion into the upper slot of the triangle. It fit perfectly, emitting a soft click. Kyle placed the locket in the lower right slot, and Dara completed with the golden key in the left. For a moment, nothing happened. The three held their breath, fearing they had misinterpreted the riddle. Then an internal mechanism began to work, centuries-old gears slowly moving with a metallic creak. The rock face began to move, sliding sideways and revealing a small chamber carved into the stone. Inside, protected by a surprisingly well-preserved metal box, was a bundle of documents wrapped in a waxed cloth that had protected it from moisture over the years. With trembling hands, Iris removed the package. The box also contained a small hand-painted portrait of Mary Iris, showing a woman with a determined expression and deeply wise eyes. "It's her," Iris whispered, feeling an immediate connection with her ancestor. Dara carefully opened the waxed cloth, revealing the preserved documents. On top was a letter addressed "To my descendants," written in the same elegant calligraphy as the previous letter. "My dears, if you are reading this, it means you have unraveled the enigma and found our family's true treasure, the truth. It is not the lands that matter, but the justice they represent. Attached you will find the original land grant documents, proof of the forgeries made by Edmund Barnes, and testimonies of witnesses who were threatened into silence. There is also a detailed map showing the exact extent of our properties. I used this elaborate method not out of distrust, but for protection. The Barnes would not hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatened their power. Thus, I let them think they had won. while planting the seed of truth to blossom at the right time. Seek not revenge, but justice. Do not destroy, but build. These lands were blessed by the spirits of the forest long before documents existed, and will remain long after we have all returned to the sacred soil. I entrust to you not only our material inheritance, but our spiritual legacy, respect for the land, for the waters, and for the peoples who depend on them. With eternal love, Mary Iris Thornbury. When Dara finished reading, the three remained in reverent silence, absorbing the profound meaning of the words. It was not just about reclaiming land or wealth, but about restoring a historical truth, correcting an injustice that had affected generations. "We did it," Kyle finally said, a slow smile forming on his face. "After so many years, we finally have the proof." Iris felt tears in her eyes. My great-great-grandmother. She thought of everything. She protected the family by sacrificing her own chance for justice in life. The moment of celebration was interrupted by a shout from the direction of the boat. It was Jareth, waving frantically. "Someone's coming! 2 fast boats!" Quickly stowing the documents in the backpack, the three ran back along the bank. In the distance, they could see 2 powerful speedboats approaching at high speed. "Barnes," Kyle said through clenched teeth. "Someone must have followed us to the guest house." "Quick, to the boat!" Dara shouted. They boarded hastily, and Jareth immediately started the engine. But his fishing boat, though reliable, could not compete in speed with the modern speedboats that were approaching. "We won't be able to escape," the fisherman admitted, maneuvering to move away from the bank. "They're too fast." "Where can we go?" Iris asked desperately, clutching the backpack with the documents to her chest. Jareth thought for a moment, his experienced eyes assessing the currents and the horizon. "I know a way. Through the bayous. It's risky with a boat this size, but it might give us some advantage." Without waiting for confirmation, the fisherman turned sharply, heading to a point where the forest seemed to meet the water. To inexperienced eyes, it looked like dense vegetation. But Jareth knew that there was a narrow natural channel there, used by generations of river dwellers for alternative navigation during high water. The pursuing speedboats noticed the maneuver and increased their speed. In one of them, Iris recognized the silhouette of Julian Barnes, gesturing orders to his men. "They're going to catch us," Dara observed, fear evident in her voice. "Not if I can help it," Jareth replied with determination, guiding the boat into the almost invisible entrance of the bayou. They entered the narrow passage seconds before the speedboats arrived. The dense vegetation swallowed them, creating a natural barrier between them and their pursuers. "They won't be able to get through with those big speedboats," Jareth explained, slowing down to navigate safely between partially submerged trees and aquatic vegetation. "They'll have to go around through the main river. That'll give us some time." "Where are we going?" Kyle asked, helping to push away branches that blocked the way. "To the Catalpa Bend community. My cousin is the leader there. We'll be safe, at least until we decide the next step." Iris looked back one last time, seeing only a green wall where the open river had been. The documents were safe for now. But everyone knew the battle was far from over. Julian Barnes would not give up easily. With his influence and resources, it would only be a matter of time until he tracked them down again. "We need a plan," Iris said, sitting beside Kyle as the boat slowly moved through the green labyrinth. "We can't keep running forever." "I agree," Dara replied, her analytical mind already working on the possibilities. "With these documents, we can file a lawsuit, but the process could take years. The Barnes have powerful lawyers, politicians in their pocket. And during that time, we'd be constantly in danger," Kyle completed the reasoning. Iris opened the backpack, carefully taking out the portrait of Mary Iris. She looked at her ancestor's face, seeking inspiration, strength, guidance. "She didn't run away," Iris murmured, gently tracing the painting with her fingers. "She retreated strategically, created a long-term plan. We need to do the same." At that moment, navigating the secret paths of the southern forest, surrounded by both danger and the protection that nature offered, the three began to formulate a strategy not only to reclaim the lands, but to expose a historical truth that could change Riverton's future. Meanwhile, on the open waters of the Meeting of the Waters, Julian Barnes furiously watched the point, where his target's boat had disappeared. Beside him, in a separate speedboat, was his uncle Jeremy, the old patriarch, whose wrinkled face was contorted by a mixture of anger and fear. "They found the safe," Jeremy stated, his voice trembling. "After all these years, we can still catch them," Julian insisted. "I know people in the river communities. I can offer rewards." Jeremy looked at his nephew with an expression that mixed contempt and resignation. "You still don't understand, do you? It's not just about documents or land. It's about a lie that has sustained our family for generations. If that comes to light—" The old man did not complete the sentence, but it was not necessary. Both knew that the Barnes empire, built on fraudulent documents and threats, could completely collapse. "Let's go back to the city," Jeremy finally said. "I need to talk to some judges, politicians. We still have cards to play." The speedboats turned around, leaving behind only waves that would soon calm, while under the green canopy of the flooded forest, the truth, so long submerged, finally began to emerge, as inexorable as the river's own current. "Idea. Trust me." Before they could argue further, Iris hid behind a large aerial root, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. Kyle wanted to go back, but Ronan stopped him with a firm grip on his arm. "If we trust her, we really need to trust her," the young river dweller whispered. "Let's move back a bit, but stay close." The group silently retreated to a denser area of vegetation, from where they could observe the log bridge without being seen. Minutes later, a small group of men in dark uniforms emerged on the opposite bank, led by Julian Barnes. "Are you sure they came this way?" he asked sharply to a man who appeared to be a local guide. "Absolutely, boss. The trail only goes in this direction." Julian eyed the log with suspicion. "It looks unstable." "Firm enough to cross one at a time," the guide assured. "I'm sure the fugitives have already crossed it." As they discussed, Iris moved stealthily through the shadows, reaching a point on the bank distant from the log. There, using the machete, she began to silently cut one of the thickest lianas hanging from the trees. Julian finally decided to cross, ordering his men to follow him one by one. When the third man was in the middle of the log, Iris made her move. With a powerful swing of the machete, she completely severed the liana she was holding, and a previously weakened section of the log, quick work Ronan had done during their crossing without the others noticing, gave way under the weight. The man fell into the dark waters with a cry of surprise. The guide, who would be next to cross, recoiled in fright. Julian, already on the other side, cursed furiously as he saw his team divided. Taking advantage of the confusion, Iris ran towards where her friends were hiding. "Now," she whispered, "while they're separated." The group dashed along the trail Ronan indicated, quickly moving away. Behind them they heard Julian's furious shouts and the sound of people trying to get around the improvised obstacle. "That was brilliant," Dara gasped as they ran. "How did you know the log was weakened?" "I didn't," Iris replied with a smile, "but I noticed Ronan was doing something to it during our crossing. I trusted he had a reason." The young river dweller smiled modestly. "We always prepare escape routes when strangers appear in our territory. You never know when you'll need to throw them off." They ran for another hour, until they were sure they had left their pursuers behind. The path now climbed slightly, leaving the Kates flooded areas and entering a drier stretch of forest. "We're close," Maeve informed, relief evident in her voice. "St. Helens Landing is just over that rise." When they finally sighted the first houses of the neighboring community, the sun was already setting, painting the sky with orange hues that filtered through the green canopy. St. Helens Landing was smaller than Catalpa Bend, but equally welcoming, with simple houses organized around a central clearing. They were received by Elder Nora, a respected woman whom Ronan introduced as the community's shaman. Despite the unexpected arrival of strangers, she offered shelter and food. Without asking many questions, Southern hospitality transcended curiosities. "You can stay in the guest house," she said, leading them to a modest but clean building. "And tomorrow, Jude can take you by boat to the main road, where buses pass for Riverton." After a simple but comforting dinner of fish, flour, and local fruits, the group gathered to assess their situation. "Julian won't give up easily," Kyle pondered. "We need to be in Riverton early tomorrow and act quickly." I agree, Dara nodded. I'll try to contact Professor Augustus as soon as we have cell signal. If we can get his validation of the documents tomorrow, we can release everything online at the same time, Iris completed. The story, the documents, the authenticity report. Maeve, who had remained quiet, absorbing the conversation, suddenly stood up. There's a computer at the community school. We can finish organizing the digital files tonight, prepare everything for upload. The plan took concrete shape. They would spend the night finalizing digital preparations. In the morning, they would leave early for Riverton. While Dara would seek the professor to validate the documents, Iris and Kyle would assemble a complete dossier for the press. Maeve would contribute her digital knowledge, preparing anonymous posts for various platforms, which would be activated simultaneously when everything was ready. Like an information bomb, the young woman explained enthusiastically, exploding everywhere at once, impossible to contain. While the others headed to the small school to work on the computers, Iris remained for a moment on the guest house porch, contemplating the starry sky. She felt strangely calm, as if all the pieces were finally fitting into a centuries-old puzzle. Elder Nora approached silently, sitting beside her on a rustic bench. "Your spirit is restless, my child," the elder commented softly. "You carry a great weight on your shoulders." "A weight of many generations," Iris confirmed, surprised by the woman's perception. "I saw your face as soon as you arrived. Native eyes don't lie." Elder Nora smiled gently. "My own grandmother was of your people. The stories about Mary Iris are still told among the elders." Iris felt a shiver run down her spine. "You know my great-great-grandmother's story?" "Parts of it. The woman who defied the powerful, who guarded secrets in water and on land, so that one day the truth would come to light." The elder held Iris's hands in hers, rough but warm. "What you do now completes a circle. The serpent bites its own tail." "I'm afraid," Iris admitted in a whisper, "of failing, of not being worthy of this legacy. Fear is wise when it makes us cautious, foolish when it paralyzes us." Elder Nora lightly squeezed her hands. "You are not alone on this journey. You have allies in the world of men and in the world of spirits." With that, the elder rose and returned to the darkness of the night, leaving Iris with an inexplicable sense of comfort and renewed determination. The morning brought new vigor to the group. After a night of intense work, all files were organized, explanatory texts drafted, and dissemination platforms selected. Jude, the boatman promised by Elder Nora, awaited them with his small vessel docked at the community's makeshift port. They said goodbye to their young guides, Maeve and Ronan, who would return to Catalpa Bend by an alternative route, bringing news of their successful escape. Elder Nora blessed each of them with a small ritual, sprinkling fragrant water with herbs over their heads, while murmuring words in an ancient tongue. "For protection," she explained simply. The boat trip was calm, gliding through increasingly wide bayous until they reached a point where the forest gave way to a dirt road. There, as promised, they managed to board a rural bus that made the journey to the outskirts of Riverton. During the journey, Dara finally got cell signal and called her advisor, Professor Augustus Pym. The conversation was brief and coded, arranging an urgent meeting at the university's central library at 2 in the afternoon. Upon arriving in the city, the group strategically separated. Dara went to the university with her set of original documents. Iris and Kyle headed to a modest hotel in the center, where they could use secure computers to finalize the digital preparation. They agreed to meet at 5 in the afternoon at the literary cafe, if everything went as planned. Meanwhile, across town, in the luxurious office of Barnes Enterprises, Jeremy received a furious and frustrated Julian. "They tricked us in the forest," the nephew reported, still with mud on his boots and scratches on his arms. "Some trick with a fallen log. By the time we managed to get around the obstacle, they had already disappeared." Jeremy listened with an impassive expression, his aged hands resting on his carved wooden cane. At the end of the report, he remained silent for long moments, as if deeply pondering every aspect of the situation. "We underestimated the girl," he finally said, "just as we underestimated her great-great-grandmother a century ago. We can still find them, Julian insisted. "I have men watching the roads, the ports, the bus station." "Too late." Jeremy slowly shook his head. "They are already in the city, and they know what they have in their hands. So what do we do? Wait for them to destroy our family?" The old patriarch stood up with some difficulty, walking to the window that offered a panoramic view of Riverton. Below the city his family had helped shape, with methods not always ethical, stretched out in a mosaic of concrete, asphalt, and green spots of parks. "There's another way to deal with this," he finally said, "one my father should have considered decades ago." "What way?" "The truth," Jeremy replied simply, turning to face his surprised nephew. "Or at least, our version of it." At the Central Library of the State University of Riverton, Dara met with Professor Augustus Pym, a 60-year-old man with grey hair and eyes sharpened by decades of critical analysis of historical documents. In a room reserved for researchers, she carefully presented the original documents found in Mary Iris's secret safe. The professor examined each piece with a magnifying glass and gloves, his face changing between expressions of shock, admiration, and indignation. "Extraordinary," he repeatedly murmured, checking watermarks, paper types, calligraphic styles. Simply extraordinary. After 2 hours of meticulous analysis, the verdict came without hesitation. They are authentic, without a shadow of a doubt. These documents will revolutionize our understanding of Riverton's land history. The professor adjusted his glasses, looking directly at Dara. "Do you have any idea of the bomb you're holding?" "I do, Professor. That's why we need your official validation. You'll have my full report in an hour, and my testimony wherever necessary." At the hotel, Iris and Kyle finalized the digital preparations. They had created an anonymous website hosted on international servers where all documentation would be made available. They also prepared a series of posts for social media, texts for independent journalists, and emails for indigenous rights organizations and historical preservation groups. "Almost everything is ready," Kyle commented, checking the last files. "Just need the professor's report to include, and Dara's green light." Iris nodded, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. "Once we launch, there's no going back. The Barnes will come at us with everything they have." "We are prepared," Kyle assured, holding her hand across the table, "and we are not alone." At 4:30 in the afternoon, Dara sent a message. "All set. Report complete and signed. Meet you at the cafe at 5. It was the signal they had been waiting for. The 3 sets of documents were authenticated, digitized, and ready for dissemination. The centuries-old truth would finally emerge from the shadows of history. The literary cafe in Remembrance Square was a traditional meeting point for intellectuals, artists, and students in Riverton. With walls lined with bookshelves, dark wooden tables, and a permanent aroma of fresh coffee and old paper, it offered the perfect environment for intellectual conspiracies. Iris and Kyle arrived first, choosing a back table from where they could observe the entrance without being immediately noticed. Minutes later, Dara joined them, bringing with her a folder containing Professor Augustus's report. "He was impressed," she reported in a low voice, as she ordered coffee from the waiter. "He said they are documents of inestimable historical value. He's already secured space in the university archive for the originals when all this is over." "So we're ready?" Kyle asked, looking at the 2 women. Iris hesitated for a moment. Her whole life had changed in a few days. She was about to expose one of Riverton's most powerful families, reclaim lands valued at millions, and potentially rewrite part of the city's history. It was an immense responsibility. "We are," she finally replied, determined. "For Mary Iris, for my grandmother, for all whose stories were silenced." Kyle opened the laptop they had brought, connecting to the cafe's internet. With a few clicks, he accessed the administrative panel of the website they had created. A single green button flashed on the screen. Publish. "Together," Iris suggested, placing her finger on the trackpad. Dara and Kyle placed theirs next to hers and with a single movement pressed the button. At that instant, Like a ripple spreading across a lake after a stone's impact, the information began to flow across the internet. The website became active. Automatic posts were published on various social media networks, and emails were sent to dozens of journalists and organizations. The story of Mary Iris Thornbury and the fraudulent usurpation of her lands by the Barnes family was finally being told to the world after almost a century and a half of forced silence. The three friends observed the first signs of repercussion on their cell phones: notifications of shares, messages from journalists asking for more information, surprised comments from historians and activists. "It worked," Dara murmured, incredulous. "It really worked." The moment of celebration was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of a familiar figure at the cafe. Jeremy Barnes, leaning on his cane, accompanied only by a discreet assistant, not by armed guards as they might have expected. The old patriarch walked slowly to their table, showing no surprise at finding them there. It was as if he knew exactly where they would be. "Miss Sterling," he greeted Iris with a slight nod. "I believe we have much to discuss." Kyle stood up defensively. "There's nothing to discuss. The truth is already out there." "Precisely why I am here," Jeremy replied calmly, "to offer my version of it." The old man sat down without asking permission, his movements revealing his advanced age and a paradoxical dignity for someone whose fortune was built on fraud. "I just gave a press conference," he informed, surprising everyone. "I announced that Barnes Enterprises is formally recognizing the Thornbury family's claim to the historic properties in downtown Riverton." The declaration fell like a bomb on the trio. Of all the possible reactions from the Barnes, this was the least expected. "Why?" Iris asked directly, her eyes fixed on the old man's, searching for signs of deceit. "Because it's inevitable," Jeremy replied with surprising frankness. "Your documents are authentic. The fraud committed by my great-grandfather is undeniable. We could fight in the courts for years, decades even, but in the end the truth would prevail." "And you simply accept that?" Dara questioned, skeptical. A tired smile appeared on the wrinkled face. "I am a businessman above all, Ms. Lim. I recognize when a battle is lost. The question now is how to turn that defeat into something less devastating." "You want a deal," Iris concluded. "Exactly. One that benefits both parties." Jeremy gestured to his assistant, who placed a folder on the table. "I propose the creation of a joint foundation, administered equally by representatives of the Thornbury family, yourself, and the Barnes. The foundation would receive legal ownership of all the disputed lands." Kyle opened the folder, quickly examining the documents. "And what would happen to these lands?" "Part of them would be preserved as historical heritage, with a museum dedicated to the true history of Riverton, including the role of indigenous peoples in its formation. Another part would remain as a commercial area, but with profits divided between the foundation and social programs for indigenous communities in the region." Iris listened attentively, her mind quickly analyzing the implications. "And the shopping mall?" "It would be resized, less intrusive, more integrated into the historical heritage. And it would bear the Thornbury name," Jeremy added, carefully observing Iris's reaction. The three exchanged glances, communicating silently. It was a surprisingly reasonable, almost generous proposal. But it came from a Barnes, a family known for its shrewdness and manipulation. "We would need guarantees," Dara finally said. "Impeccable documentation, independent oversight, clauses against future attempts to reverse the agreement." "All of that is provided for in the proposal," Jeremy assured, "including the suggestion that your esteemed Professor Augustus Pym join the Foundation's supervisory board." Iris looked deeply into the old man's eyes. "Why are you doing this? Really?" Jeremy remained silent for a moment, as if pondering how much of his inner truth he was willing to reveal. "I am 92 years old, Ms. Sterling. I have lived long enough to see the cycles of history repeat themselves. I have seen empires crumble for failing to adapt to new times." He paused, his gaze distant, as if seeing beyond the present moment. "And, perhaps, somewhere within me, I always knew this day would come, that Mary Iris's truth would eventually find its way to the surface, like an underground river that finally emerges into the light. The sincerity in the old patriarch's words was disconcerting. It was not a complete surrender. The Barnes would still maintain considerable influence and profits, but it represented a form of justice that Mary Iris might have approved of. Not just the reclamation of land, but the recognition of historical truth. "I need time to analyze the proposal," Iris finally replied, "with independent lawyers, historians, representatives of indigenous organizations." "Understandable," Jeremy nodded, rising with some effort. "Take all the time you need. The offer will remain on the table." Before leaving, the old man paused, looking one last time at Iris. "You know you have her eyes, your great-great-grandmother's. There are old portraits at the company headquarters, the same eyes that challenged my great-grandfather a century and a half ago." With these enigmatic words, Jeremy Barnes departed, leaving behind not only a proposed agreement, but the acknowledgement of a centuries-old battle that finally reached its conclusion. In the weeks that followed, Riverton experienced a true historical and cultural revolution. The story of the Thornbury family and the Barnes became the dominant topic in all circles, from academic to popular. Iris, advised by a team of experts, including Dara and Professor Augustus, finally accepted Jeremy's proposal, with some modifications that further strengthened the position of the native peoples in the foundation. The agreement was signed in a symbolic ceremony at the Meeting of the Waters, with representatives of various local native ethnicities present. Jeremy, in a surprising gesture, formally apologized for the actions of his ancestors, acknowledging the historical debt not only to the Thornbury family, but to all native peoples whose lands and cultures were usurped during colonization. The small craft shop, River's Charms, not only survived but expanded, becoming the heart of a new cultural center in the resized shopping mall, now called the Thornbury Commercial and Cultural Center. The space brought together native artisans from across the region, offering them unprecedented space and visibility. Dara was appointed director of the newly created Museum of Southern History, where Mary Iris's original documents held a prominent position in a permanent exhibition on the true builders of Riverton. As for Kyle, he continued his work as an artisan, but also took on an important role as an instructor in a program for the revitalization and preservation of native craft techniques funded by the new foundation. And Iris, in addition to her position on the foundation's board, she found her true calling as a storyteller. She traveled to schools and communities throughout the region, sharing not only Mary Iris's saga, but hundreds of other stories of the river people that were at risk of being forgotten. On a particularly significant afternoon, 1 year after the events that had changed their lives, Iris and Kyle visited Mary Iris's newly discovered grave in a small cemetery on the banks of the Blackwood River. The simple headstone had been replaced by a memorial worthy of the extraordinary woman who rested there. As they laid flowers and lit small candles according to tradition, Kyle intertwined his fingers with Iris's. What began as an ancestral mission had blossomed into love, a love nurtured by mutual admiration, respect for shared origins, and the joint struggle for justice. "What do you think she would say if she could see us now?" Kyle asked, looking at the name carved in stone. Mary Iris Thornbury, 1845-1923. Iris smiled, feeling a deep connection with her ancestor. "I think she would say that truth, like the river, always finds its way. It can be dammed, diverted, buried for a time, but eventually it emerges to the surface and follows its natural course." At that moment, as if in cosmic confirmation, the setting sun cast its rays over the waters of the Blackwood River, creating a golden path that seemed to connect past to present, ancestors to descendants, in an eternal circle of justice and renewal. 5 years had passed since the historic agreement between the Thornbury and Barnes families. Riverton had transformed subtly but significantly. The Thornbury Commercial and Cultural Center had become not only a landmark in the city, but a model of integration between modern commerce and the preservation of native culture, inspiring similar projects in other southern cities. On a sunny August morning, Iris walked through the wide central corridor of the complex, observing the movement of visitors with satisfaction. Tourists from various parts of the world were enchanted by the authentic native craft shops, where artisans worked in full view of the public, demonstrating ancestral techniques of weaving, carving, and pottery. Lost in thought today? Kyle's familiar voice brought her back to the present. Iris smiled at her husband. They had married 3 years earlier in a ceremony that blended Catholic and native traditions, held precisely at the Meeting of the Waters, the place that had changed their lives. "Just reflecting on everything that's happened," she replied, accepting the small package he offered her, a typical river-dweller breakfast bought from the food court that prioritized local cuisine. "We have a lot to celebrate," Kyle commented, discreetly pointing to a group of children passing by, guided by a teacher. Another school for the cultural tour today. The educational program developed by Dara at the Museum of Southern History had become an official part of the municipal school curriculum. Children of all ages regularly visited the complex to learn about the true history of Riverton, the contributions of native peoples, and the importance of cultural preservation. "Today's group is from the Dockside Quarter Municipal School," Iris observed, recognizing the uniform. "My old neighborhood." They walked together to the museum where Dara, now a respected historian with several internationally published articles, was preparing to receive the young visitors. Seeing her friends, she waved enthusiastically. "You're just in time. We're opening the new wing today." The museum's new wing was dedicated to the native women who had played fundamental roles in Southern cultural resistance. Mary Iris Thornbury held a prominent place, but many other stories, previously forgotten by traditional historiography, now gained visibility. "We have a surprise for you," Kyle commented, as they followed Dara through the museum corridors. "You and your surprises," Iris smiled. "What is it this time?" "Patience," Dara replied with a mischievous glint in her eyes. "You'll find out soon." They arrived at a room still closed to the public. A banner covered by fabric hid what appeared to be the title of the new exhibition. Dara positioned Iris in front of it, and with a theatrical gesture removed the fabric. "Flowers of Resistance, Thornbury Women in the Preservation of Southern Memory," Iris read aloud, moved. Below the main title, a dedication. "In honor of the Guardians of Truth, from Mary Iris to Iris Sterling, 5 generations of women who did not allow history to be erased." "Come in," Dara invited, opening the exhibition door. Inside, Iris was met with a meticulous reconstruction of her maternal family's history. Photographs, documents, personal artifacts, and oral history recordings composed a powerful narrative that connected 5 generations of Thornbury women. How did you get all this?" Iris asked, delicately touching a photograph of her grandmother June, that she had never seen before. "It was detective work," Kyle explained. "Dara led the research, but we had help from many river communities. The stories were there, preserved in the memory of the elders, just waiting to be documented." "And this is the centerpiece." Dara pointed to a special display case in the center of the room. Inside it rested Mary Iris's original jade medallion, along with the locket and the golden key, the 3 objects that had unraveled the mystery and changed the course of Riverton's history. "We thought this would be the appropriate place for them," Kyle commented, "where they can tell their story to new generations." Iris felt tears in her eyes, moved not only by the gesture but by all that it represented. It wasn't just her personal history that was being preserved, but a fundamental chapter of native resistance that had long been deliberately erased from official records. "There's one more thing," Dara smiled, leading Iris to a small adjacent room. There they found Maeve, now a young university student studying computer science, working on a computer connected to a large screen. The young woman who years ago had helped them digitize documents in the river community had become an expert in technology applied to cultural preservation. "Ready for launch?" Dara asked her. "All systems go," Maeve replied with a proud smile, pressing a few keys. On the large screen, a modern and elegant website appeared, titled Ancestral Voices, Digital Archive of Southern Native Memory. It was a vast online repository where native communities from across the region could record their stories, traditions, and knowledge on their own terms, using technology to strengthen, not replace, oral tradition. This is the project we've been working on for 2 years, Kyle explained. Using part of the funds from the Thornbury Barnes Foundation, we created a platform where traditional knowledge can be preserved and shared on the community's own terms. Iris watched in wonder as Maeve navigated the site, showing recordings of elders telling ancient stories, young people demonstrating artisan techniques, and interactive maps of native lands with their specific histories. "It's perfect," she finally managed to say, her voice choked with emotion. "Exactly what Mary Iris would have wanted." At that moment, they heard the murmur of children arriving for the school visit. Iris took a deep breath, regaining her composure. As the museum's official storyteller, she was often the one who received school groups, transmitting history not as cold facts, but as living narratives that connected the present to the past. "Ready for another day of keeping memory alive?" Kyle asked, affectionately holding her hand. "Always," she replied with a smile, heading to the entrance to greet the young visitors. As she walked, Iris reflected on how her life had been completely transformed in just 5 years. From a shopkeeper struggling to survive the threat of a shopping mall, she had become a guardian of memory, a bridge between worlds, a continuation of the work, begun by her great-great-grandmother more than a century ago. The children greeted her with curious smiles and admiring glances when the teacher introduced her. Iris looked at those faces, some descendants of natives, others of immigrants, all part of the rich cultural tapestry that formed contemporary Riverton, and knew exactly how to begin. "Have you ever heard about the river that flows beneath the earth? The one that, even when we can't see it, continues its journey, until one day inevitably it emerges to the surface. This is the story of truth, children. And it begins with a woman named Mary Iris Thornbury." Outside the exhibition hall, through the museum's wide windows, the Blackwood River continued its eternal course, its dark waters carrying ancient and new stories to the great meeting with the Silver Stream River, where they would remain distinct even as they traveled side by side. Different yet inseparable, like the multiple narratives that form the true history of the southern lands.